Here is a pink ink by Sailor Kobe number 54.
Let's jump straight to the end with my opinion on this ink. The paper I'm using here is a Maruman Mnemosyne Notebook.
I have been so unhappy using this ink. It is an un-ink, uninspired, undesirable, unreadable. I think only one time in the past have I abandoned a review while filming, and this will be the second. I can't read it. It is too light, and I have to use a different pen and ink in order to take the notes. This is horrible in every way, but there is a single great thing to be gained here. It's only a sample, and I will never use it again. If I were given this ink, I could know that the person is my enemy and should be crushed. So, I'm not a fan.
The pen for today is a Parker J.R.R. All of the writing samples are done with a Platinum 3776 with a soft fine nib which writes rather dry, a Hero 7035 with a fine nib that writes wet, a Visconti Van Gogh with a medium nib and an average flow, a Lamy Safari with a broad nib that writes average. Now that we know my opinion on this ink, let's take a look at the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine.
Looking at the soft fine nib, it's going to be tough because you can barely see it. I can barely see it. So since you can barely see it, it obviously doesn't feather or spread. We do see moments where we can see some of the writing, and that is where it has shaded. I hate this ink. Looking at the wet fine nib, you see it is a whole lot darker than it was with the soft fine because it could not have been lighter. I don't think that was possible. It does not feather, does not spread. Fair amount of this is pretty readable. It is still kind of painful to actually read on the page. I can see more of it than just about at all. But I am not going to torture myself and have to look at page after page of this. So that's why I knew this was ending early. I hate this ink. Looking at the medium nib, it is a tad bit lighter than it was with the soft fine. At least it is darker than, or a tad bit lighter than it was with the wet fine. At least it's darker than we had with the soft fine. It does not feather, does not spread, it does shade. However, the problem is the only parts that are easy to read are the darker parts. Otherwise, this is a horrific ink that I hate. Looking at the broad nib, it is quite a bit lighter than it was with the soft fine, or at least as light as it was with the soft fine. It's really hard to tell with how light it is. Now, at least I can barely see it, so it barely feathers, I guess. I'm going to say no feather, no spread. There's a few moments where I can see there's letters on the page, and we're going to say that those are shading. I really do hope that this is coming through much better on camera, but in person, this is horrific, and I hate it. Absolutely no surprise that there's no ghosting since you can barely see it on the front of the page, and nothing bled through, so yay, this horrible ink doesn't bleed.
Like most inks, this one comes in a bottle.
This is how the Pilot Custom 823 fits. And here is the Pelican M1000. Here is the ink level when you can no longer fill a Lamy Safari. There is approximately 7 milliliters of ink left.
There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is immediately put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. The one on the right, marked with a D, is let dry for 10 minutes before putting it into water. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. The highlighter is on the top left, pen flush is on the top right, 1/3 bleach solution is on the bottom left, and water is on the bottom right. With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at some color comparables. While it's nice to see inks in the same color family, I prefer to find an ink that complements this color on the page. Here is a blue-black ink by Colorverse Proxima B. Here is a gray ink by Graf von Faber-Castell Stone Gray. Here is a blue ink by Organic Studio Mark Twain's Halley's Comet Blue. Here is a black ink by Zenzoi Black. So what nib and pen do I recommend using for this ink? The paper I'm using here is yellow Rhodia paper.
I hate this ink. It almost becomes readable with a wet fine if you must. I hate this ink. I don't think I hate another human enough to make them use it. No pen for you.
I hope you got something out of this video, and I want to remind you that the best way you can support this or any channel is to let retailers know where you've heard of something if you were to go to buy.